Hare Krishna, my name is Gaura Shakti Das. I first came across the devotees, I'm from America, and I first came across the devotees in 1970 or 1971, I don't remember which. I grew up in a state called Minnesota, near a city called Minneapolis. And at that time, Shivaram Maharaj, before he was sannyasi, he had a preaching center in some part of the city of Minneapolis. And the local newspaper did a very large story about the devotees in Minneapolis. And that was my first contact. And I remember reading the story about the devotees. It was probably a page and a half of a full-size newspaper. And I was quite intrigued by what I read, specifically how simply they lived. No furniture in the house. The reporter went to their house. There was no furniture. The devotee slept on the floor, lived very simply. And for some reason, I found that attractive. And I didn't actually meet them, but that was my first contact. And then spring quarter of 1971, I think I was 17 years old. That was my first year as a university student, University of Minnesota. And I was studying mathematics there. And I saw 3 devotees on campus. And I kept my distance from them. I just watched them for a little while. And I distinctly remember thinking, after watching them, how they were interacting with the students. I remember thinking, I could never cut my hair and dress like that. But you know, obviously Krishna has proven me wrong. And I got my first book, not from the devotees, but from a university bookstore on campus. And it wasn't a book, it was a pamphlet called Krishna is a Reservoir of Pleasure. And that pamphlet is still being printed today in 2018, and this was in 1971. And in the pamphlet at that time, there was a beautiful drawing, I'm not sure if it was color or black and white, of Krishna, threefold bending form, standing on a lotus flower in a pond. In the background was forest and some small waterfalls. And that drawing, painting, whatever you want to call it, captivated me. And I remember I would stare at that literally for hours. And I also liked the philosophy, but understood, a fraction of 1%. But I just really liked the picture. And I couldn't explain to myself why, but it just was. So that was my first interaction with Srila Prabhupada's books. 1972 or 73, I'm not sure which, I was hitchhiking down the west coast of America through California, and I met a Sankirtan devotee in Berkeley, and he was very enthusiastic. He tried to sell me a Bhagavad Gita, and told me if simply by reading this book, 3/4 of your past karma will automatically be eliminated. And he was so enthusiastic by it that I was, also caught up in his energy. I had no idea what karma was, nor why I should want to get rid of any of it, what to speak of 3/4 of it, but I was enthused by his enthusiasm. But he asked $5 for the book. I only owned $2.65. That was my entire net worth at that time. I was young, I was traveling throughout America. But he said, just down a block or two is the temple in Berkeley. Go there and I can get a book there. So I went there and I gave them all my money, got a Bhagavad Gita with a ripped cover, and I read it front to back over a period of about a week. The vast majority of it went way over my head, but I was attracted by the philosophy. Because I knew when I was a student, when I saw the devotees, I knew I wasn't happy. And Krishna gave me a very, very deep realization. I was studying mathematics in university. I joined university when I was 16 years old. And I knew I wasn't happy. And I could tell that my peers, they weren't happy. My upperclassmen, they also weren't happy. And the professors who were teaching, they weren't happy. And the realization that Krishna gave to me was, if I'm following the same path that these people have already progressed on ahead of me, how can I expect to get a different result than what they've gotten? I'm on the same path. I'm going to get the same thing. And so with that realization, I decided I need a real education. I want an education in life. And I don't think that any university can give me what I'm looking for. And so with that understanding, I set out just searching. And that's about the same time that I got the pamphlet, The Reservoir of Pleasure. And Krishna connected me with Srila Prabhupada in that fashion. I went to my first temple in Portland, Oregon. I think it was 1973. Had some prasadam there. Did not like it, because I grew up in a Midwestern state in America in the 50s, 60s. Well, my parents fed me meat every day, and vegetables came in a can, and otherwise it was potatoes. Spicing meant salt, and if I felt really exotic, a little black pepper. But that was the extent of my spicing in the cuisine I was raised on. And so when I went to my temple for my first time and for a Sunday feast, there was, I don't even remember what subject, probably eggplant, potato, with all these strange vegetables and these bizarre spices, and I don't want that. But I had some fruit, but I was really attracted by the philosophy. And so I read through Bhagavad Gita several times. I heard that there was a ashram in the country. I did not like the idea of living in a city. I think it was summer of 1973, Srila Prabhupada went to Chicago for Rath Yatra. I was living 400 miles from there, and so I went there with a friend, and we didn't speak with Srila Prabhupada, but we saw him, went to classes, went to the Rath Yatra, but just having more and more contact with the devotees. And finally, at one point, 1974, I decided that I want to join to see what this experience of Krishna consciousness is actually about. And I had the understanding that you can't fully taste it, fully taste it, in a weekend, in a week, in 2 weeks, or like that, but I would have to immerse myself in it for some time. So I had heard that 1974 that Srila Prabhupada was going to New Vrindavan, which was the only ashram in the country, in America. The others were in the cities. And by Krishna's arrangement, I was not able to meet Srila Prabhupada there in New Vrindavan that summer. But I went there for Janmashtami. Radha Damodar traveling Sankirtan party came, and there was a big, big Janmashtami festival in New Vrindavan, August of 1974. It was early that year. It was in the middle of August, around the 15th. And I met so many devotees there, and I decided that I want to join here with the understanding of, let me just try this. Let me put it on, see how it fits. And so I decided that my plans at that time were I was going down to South America, just, not really doing anything, just traveling around. But let me see about this Hare Krishna and see what it's all about. So I decided that, okay, this is Janmashtami, this is middle of August. Let me stay until the spring of 1975. And that will give me sufficient time to adequately experience it and make a rational, intelligent decision. So I made arrangements to do that. And then I stayed, I left from Janmashtami and went back to Minneapolis to get rid of my belongings and such, and came back 2 weeks later. And I moved into the temple in New Vrindavan around the beginning of September of 1974. And it was very austere there in New Vrindavan at that time. I mean, very austere. We were still bathing outdoors, even into October when it was sometimes snowing. It was very cold. Prasadam was very simple. But the taste that one received from the Lord by engaging in His service just far, far exceeded any of the austerities, every austerity. The taste that Krishna would give far exceeded all the austerities. And in December of 74, I joined in September, so just a few months later, we had tests that we had to take, simple tests, to see if we understood enough of the philosophy to apply for initiation. And I took the test, I passed the test, and then a letter was sent to Srila Prabhupada, which he received, I think it was February of 75, and I have a copy of the reply from Srila Prabhupada, where he lists 10 or 11 different devotees. My name is in there, and he gave my name, initiated name. And so I received formal Diksha initiation from Srila Prabhupada, and I was on Lord Varaha's appearance day of February 1975. Still dead of winter, spring hadn't come, but my original intent was to stay until spring and then reevaluate, but there was no question of leaving. There was just no question. And I stayed in New Vrindavan for the next 20 years until I shifted to India, where I lived in India for a number of years. But I saw Srila Prabhupada, as I mentioned, in Chicago, Rath Yatra in 1973, I believe. And then I was able to accompany 18 devotees in a van, a two-seat van, and driver and a passenger, and then 16 of us just laid like sardines all the way to the back door in New York City. And I don't really remember anything except the journey in the van and back. It was just very interesting. But that was the second time I saw Srila Prabhupada. Then Srila Prabhupada was in Philadelphia in 1975 for Rath Yatra. I don't recall the month, but it was sometime in the summertime. And I was given permission to go and see him, and which I did. And I ended a very nice story. I ended up riding on the cart, on the Rath Yatra cart with Srila Prabhupada. And it was totally Krishna's arrangement. The circumstances are this, that Srila Prabhupada was late to arrive for the festival. I'm not sure how it is in India, but in America, if you get parade permits for a city, or in a city, there's a specific time you have to start, there's a specific route you take, and there's a specific time that you have to end. And we had to start, even though Srila Prabhupada was not present. And so I'm a young devotee, I'm less than a year in the movement, and I'm dancing in the streets, summertime in Philadelphia. The sun was out, it was rather hot, and I got tired after a while. And the cart had stopped in the middle of the road. I had no idea why they were stopped. And at that time I was thinking, I'm a little hot, I'd like to sit down and just to relax a little bit for a few minutes. And I looked around, we're in the middle of a city. I don't want to sit on the sidewalk, it wouldn't look very good. And I looked at the cart, and on the axle level, under the deities are up here, and the axle level is down here, there was a couple of devotees sitting there. So I said, okay, I can go sit there also. It's in the shade, it's not very public, nobody's going to see them. And so I went and I crawled up there on the axle with the other devotees. And after a period of time, I heard a second kirtan off in the distance. Why? It's two kirtans. There's one kirtan going on with the Lord and the devotees, and another kirtan off in the distance. And gradually, the second kirtan would get louder and louder, and I got up on my knees and put my hand over a sheet of plywood, like this. I'm looking over the sheet of plywood, and I saw another Sankirtan party off in the distance, coming towards us. And so I'm watching them come closer, and suddenly I realize there's Srila Prabhupada in that group. And that's why there's a second Sankirtan party. So I'm on my knees with my hands over the sheet of plywood, just watching the party come, Srila Prabhupada there. And I suddenly realized that they're coming right to the cart that I'm on. And there was a set of stairs at the bottom of the cart. And I looked, and Srila Prabhupada was walking up the stairs. And then I realized the sheet of plywood that I'm looking over is the back of his Vyasasana. And I look, and Srila Prabhupada sat right there, right in front of me, like this far away. Could have easily reached out and touched his head. And so there I am. They take the stairs away. The procession started again. And I'm right there behind Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krsna Maharaj is on Srila Prabhupada's left. Myself, Godbrother Arjit, and Dulal Chandra are behind Srila Prabhupada. I called down to a devotee on the street who was fanning Lord Jagannath. I'm not even sure who was above, one of the Jagannath deities, with a chamara fan, and I called down and asked him for a fan. I said, ask the pujaris up above for a fan so I can fan Prabhupada. So they sent down a peacock fan, and I'm fanning Srila Prabhupada like this with my left arm, because that's the position I was in. And my godbrother Arjit leans over to me and says, when you get tired, let me know, I'll take over. Yeah, no problem. It's like, you're going to have to pry this fan out of my dead hand. I'm never going to give this up. I didn't say that, but it's okay. And so I'm fanning, and you know, after a few minutes, your shoulder gets a little sore. You know, fan some more, and then the shoulder gets painful, and fanning Srila Prabhupada, and the pain just gets intense. And I wasn't going to give it up. And Arjit turns to me and says, are you tired yet? I said, no, don't worry, I'll let you know. With no intention of ever stopping. And suddenly he realized what was going on, and he grabbed the fan from me, and he fanned Prabhupada for a few minutes until his arm started hurting, and he gave it back. And I literally went through the other side of the pain, so that it was just totally oblivious to it. And I don't know how long I fanned Srila Prabhupada time-wise, but until the end of the parade. And the cart stopped, and Srila Prabhupada got up, and of course, all the devotees are calling out, Prabhupada, Prabhupada, because he's taking off all these garlands, and everybody wants a garland. Prabhupada is throwing these garlands off into the crowd, and he had a bouquet of flowers also. Nice bouquets. And I, of course, was also calling Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Prabhupada. And he threw the bouquet. He didn't throw it, he dropped it on the Vyasasana where he'd been sitting, and I snatched it up and grabbed that. And then I tried to follow Prabhupada off of the cart through the sea of devotees. And it was impossible. The devotees were just a huge mob, and they would open up only for Srila Prabhupada. It would open a little bit so Prabhupada could step in, and then it would close behind him. And it was kind of like, he could not get in. But I saw where they were going, and I ran around and got up there. And I was able to continue fanning Srila Prabhupada. But that was 1975 visit. And then Srila Prabhupada came in 1976 to visit New Vrindavan for his last visit. He was there about 8 or 9 days. I was able to see him every day, actually twice a day, for Bhagavatam class in the morning, and then also for evening darshans. I never asked Srila Prabhupada a question. I had opportunities to, but I was afraid because I didn't want my false ego to be injured in any fashion. And it's something that I really regret, and I advise devotees who have a spiritual master who is present, don't be foolish like I was. When you have serious questions and you have the opportunity, ask your spiritual master, because there'll come a point in time when you cannot. And I realized many years later that I was more comfortable in my ignorance, and I preferred to stay there rather than take the small risk that Srila Prabhupada might chastise me. And it's so foolish. And it's my humble request of everybody, don't be foolish like I was. Learn from my mistakes. When you have the opportunity, Take it. Don't ask foolish questions, but ask intelligent, sincere questions. And the spiritual master takes great pleasure in enlightening and helping you to gain clarity and to find the best path for you to get to Krishna according to where you are. That was the extent of my experiences with Srila Prabhupada, personally. I also had the very great good fortune of being able to help build the palace for Srila Prabhupada in New Vrindavan, and I worked on that for several years. And Srila Prabhupada told us in New Vrindavan many things that were very significant. One that I remember very clearly is when he was taking darshan one morning, he was looking at Vrindavan Chandra. The deities there are Radharani and Vrindavan Chandra. And he turned to us and said, Krishna is very pleased with your service. Go on, continue serving him in this fashion. And he also said that Krishna likes 100 times more the most simple thing grown or prepared by his devotee, like a flower, for example, compared to the nicest thing that you can buy from a non-devotee. 100 times more. So we really took that to heart in New Vrindavan. And we offered, whatever we had, we offered to the Lord for his pleasure. And one of the activities we were engaged in was building a home for Srila Prabhupada. And it literally started just as a small home. Because New Vrindavan had one thing to offer Srila Prabhupada that no other temple had. Every other temple had nice facilities, nice quarters, nicer climate, environment, things like this. But we had, in New Vrindavan, we had privacy, and we had silence and solitude, because we're way out in the country. In cities, you don't find these things. And these are very important if you're translating books, for example. And so the concept was presented to Srila Prabhupada that we want to build a simple home for you. So when you come to visit, you'll have your own place. And Srila Prabhupada accepted that. And the concept grew from a simple home to an elaborate palace of what it is now. And Srila Prabhupada would ask, whenever a devotee from New Vrindavan came to where he would ask, so when is my palace going to be ready? And he told us that when it's finished, I will come and live there. And sometimes he said, I will spend 3 months a year there. Other times he said, I will spend 6 months a year there. But the fact was that Srila Prabhupada said, I will come and live there. And so we took it to heart that Srila Prabhupada said this, it's the absolute truth, it's going to happen. But unfortunately, due to our inexperience, we were not able to complete Srila Prabhupada's palace prior to his departure. Srila Prabhupada left this world in November of 1977. It wasn't until September of 1979 that we had the palace ready to open. But when Srila Prabhupada departed in November of 1977, let me back up. We had started actually serving and worshiping Srila Prabhupada in that palace sometime in 1976. A former personal servant of Srila Prabhupada named Nandu Kumar moved to New Vrindavan, and Kirtananda Maharaj knew that Nandu Kumar was Srila Prabhupada's personal cook. And so he engaged Nandu Kumar Prabhu in cooking daily offering for Srila Prabhupada in the palace. So he would cook the offering and he would offer to Srila Prabhupada and do arti. So Srila Prabhupada has been continuously worshipped in his palace from 1976 even till today, every single day. And in 1977, when Srila Prabhupada departed, we felt, of course, there's no words to describe how a devotee feels, but the point I'm making is that Srila Prabhupada had promised us that, or he said that I will come and live in my palace. So sometime during that, we had an all-night kirtan on the day that Srila Prabhupada had left, or the day that we got news that Srila Prabhupada had left. And the devotees would just experience deep, deep sense of pain in their hearts and a great sense of loss that's really indescribable. And just the person that we've given our lives to serve and to assist however we could, he's gone. And we were never going to have his personal association again, even though very few of us had any. But Prabhupada's personal presence was just so powerful, was so Krishna conscious, that simply by a glance, not even a word, but by looking at you, he could instill such deep faith in the core of your heart that's just unshakable and irreplaceable. And the devotees, we were feeling just intense separation from Srila Prabhupada, and we didn't want to stop chanting that kirtan. And well into the depths of the night, the kirtan continued. And sometime in the late night, early mornings, the mood shifted within our hearts. And it was a collective thing that everybody experienced at the same time, where suddenly we went from a feeling of just deep pain and longing and separation to a mood of just tremendous joyfulness, because we felt right then and there, everybody felt at the same time, Srila Prabhupada's presence in the palace. We could tangibly feel it, just like I can see you in the room. We could feel Prabhupada's presence there. And he was communicating to us that even though we were unable to complete our side of the agreement, Srila Prabhupada was fulfilling his side. And he was personally manifesting his presence there in his palace. And it is still there today. Today is 2018, many years later. And the palace has been open since 1979 as a memorial to Srila Prabhupada. And literally millions of people have gone through, as simply as tourists who know nothing about Krishna, who know nothing about Srila Prabhupada, simply were intrigued to go to a palace of gold. And in Srila Prabhupada's palace, there's two murtis. One is in the study that we designed and built for Srila Prabhupada. There's a nice desk, and he's got a nice asana. We built that room so Srila Prabhupada could work on his books there, doing his translation and writing. And there's a bedroom, there's a small washroom, and there's a nice temple room. And in the temple room, there's an altar where Srila Prabhupada is installed on the altar. And between the two places, the temple room and the study, Srila Prabhupada's presence can be felt so strongly even by non-devotees. I've given many tours of Srila Prabhupada's palace, and when a group of guests enter the study, Srila Prabhupada is sitting behind his desk. We bring people in, we ask them to be quiet when they're entering the room. And almost on every single group, when people come in, you'll hear somebody go, "Oh!" And they thought that he was personally present. They could feel him. And when they looked carefully, they saw, it's a statue, so to speak. But they could feel him. They could feel Srila Prabhupada's presence. And it's similar in the temple room, but within the palace, but not quite as strongly. But for those of us who lived in New Vrindavan in those early days, and especially for those of us who in some fashion helped to build the palace, and it includes the pujaris, includes the cooks, those devotees who did nothing in terms of actual construction, but to help support the deity worship in New Vrindavan, Srila Prabhupada has a presence in his palace. There's a very deep connection amongst all the devotees there. And go there. Go visit Srila Prabhupada's palace in New Vrindavan, and you can experience his presence there. There's no politics in Srila Prabhupada's palace. Whatever problems you have in your mind, in your heart, when you go before Prabhupada and you're in his presence, the problems fly away. They're waiting outside the door for you when you leave. And so many devotees have said that. They go into Prabhupada just with big problems on their head. Oh, I need Prabhupada's guidance on this. And when they go in the room where Srila Prabhupada is, It's just the problems just gone. Of course, they're outside the door. But Srila Prabhupada can be experienced today, even today, in his palace in New Vrindavan. So that's, my, what's the word? History of personal encounters with Srila Prabhupada. Of course, he is continuously present in his books. And by serving him, you can also have some communication with him. Don't simply read Srila Prabhupada's books like you're reading a magazine or a newspaper, but study them deeply. When I always have a dictionary, and I'll have 2, 3, 4 different books out just to look here, look there for references and such. Because Srila Prabhupada and Krishna, they can speak directly to you through the books if you read them very carefully. And Prabhupada's present in his books, Lord Krishna is present in his books. And so it's my humble request to everybody that you dive deeply into the greatest gift that Srila Prabhupada gave to every one of us. That's the teachings of Lord Krishna in the different books that Srila Prabhupada has given to the world. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.